Hey everybody, Red Mage here. Welcome back to the series where I go through different RPG products that I have and give them a quick flip through and review. In this one I'm going to be going through 3 books that just have fantastic presentation and art. They're all very different, they're all very different vibes and tones, but I love all 3 so much. And I have to say, I have not read these books in great detail, so I can't give you guys, anything like a thorough review of these books. I'm not going to flip through all of them. But I wanted to give you guys an impression of these 3 books, which have been on my radar for a little while now. And they're all very different, and so I don't really have a theme for them other than they're all systems. They're all RPGs, so they're not like adventures or things like that. They're all systems. But the art is so good and so thematic, and it draws you right into each of these products. So the first is Xcrawl Classics, the role-playing game. The next is Grimwild, which is a cinematic fantasy adventure game. And the third is The Shadows of Estrin. These are all so good. And The Shadows of Estrin is pay what you want. Grimwild is not, neither is Xcrawl Classics. But you guys should check them all out. And I'll do a flip through here and you guys can get a sense of what each of them is. So first, Xcrawl Classics. This is essentially if you took the Hunger Games, Running Man, professional wrestling, and put it all together into this wild gonzo RPG setting in a sort of gladiator, Roman-esque inspired North American continent with an American empire where the founding fathers were emperors, and just like, it's absurd, absolutely absurd, over the top, ridiculous, and the art matches that tone. Now, it's obviously Goodman Games. It's based, just the system is based on DCC, Dungeon Crawl Classics, but you'll see the art is just phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. It's so good. Throughout, over and over and over, this book is so dang good. It's packed, like jam-packed, with references and jokes and art, page after page. This whole thing is 394 pages in PDF form. The key elements of X-World. So the idea is, I'll read through this first 2 paragraphs, they're so good. Fire in the sky, blood on the moon, Xcrawl and Dungeon Crawl Classics join forces to bring you Xcrawl Classics, the world's funnest death sport. Trademark. Xcrawl is an unexpected blend of genre elements that create an offbeat adventure game of strategic dungeon crawl action in a harsh, dystopic setting of absolute authoritarianism and rigid class conflict. With a quirky alternate modern history, a carnival mirror view of the strange world we live in, and a treatise on the phenomenon of fame in our celebrity-obsessed, or celebrity-worshipping culture. It's a grand strategic challenge that forces out-of-the-box thinking by presenting crawlers with improbable situations that they simply could not discover in a standard fantasy setting. Most of all, Xcrawl is fun. Monster slaying, sports car winning, crowd-pumping, face-on-the-cereal-box fun. You play crawlers, who are tough-as-nails athletes, hard-hitting brawlers, spell-weaving blasters, lethally sneaky specialists, divinity-channeling messengers, house-rocking jammers, battle-mad half-orcs, fey-touch gnomes, and more. The DJ, the dungeon judge, puts it all together, and essentially you guys look at the sense. Characters, you're no scrub, you're a crawler. It's so good. They have the same basic mechanics, the basic system as DCC from what I can tell. So if you're familiar with that game, there's nothing that's going to be shocking about the whole build of this system. It's DCC. But it's all been given this new tone, and obviously there's new stuff going on here too. But the same basic elements are there as DCC, but it's been put into this new setting and this new world with all new classes, all new races, all new spells and abilities and art. So good. You get the athlete, the blaster, the brawler, the jammer, the messenger, kind of like a cleric. You get the specialist, the acrobat, the commando, the criminal, various kinds of scouts and crypt raiders, dwarf mechanics, elf tricksters, half-orc slayers, halfling rogues. Different skills and spells. The dwarf, the gnome, the half-elf. But I mean, just look at this art. Again, if you know DCC, you know that the art in, Goodman Games, you'll know that the art in their books is just phenomenal, right? Absolutely phenomenal. and this book is no different. There's a lot of Blood Bowl in here too. Basically anything where you're dealing with a sport that involves death and destruction and mayhem and magic and fantasy, with sci-fi elements too and sort of modern stuff going on as well. It's just so good. Absolutely fantastic. And again, I really don't have time to go through this whole book in detail. It's DCC. Again, you guys know how that system works. But there's a bunch of stuff that's added into this book. But really, it's about the art. It's about the inspiration. It's about the writing. It's about the fiction. This would be a really fun game to run. I don't think I would ever see myself running this as like my go-to game, my system of choice, my world of choice, my setting of choice. DCC has never been my thing. I mean, in terms of like go-to. I love it for funnels. I love it for one-shots. I think the ideas are incredible. The tables in the books are so much fun. Fumble tables, crit tables, magic mishap tables, mercurial magic tables. I love that stuff. An athlete grapple crit table. So when you start to get an athlete grapple crit table, when it starts to get to that level of specificity, you've lost me a little bit in terms of what I'm going to run. But the ideas and the inspiration here are fantastic. And I just really like this game. It's something about it that draws me in, even though I don't think I'd ever going to play it. Certainly not as a player. I might run it at some point. But as a player, I don't think I'm ever going to play this. I still love it. I still am glad that I have it, and the art is so good. Just you read through this book and you're going to be entertained. Just as sort of a thing to do on the side, even if you're not preparing for a game. But really, it's also a great space for inspiration. Spell duels, phlogiston, it's got mojo, which is sort of a sort of meta currency. You get mojo points, which you can use to do extra things, sort of like inspiration. So again, it's not simply DCC. More stuff has been added in, like mojo and fame. You can use your fame to get some benefits. You can burn it to get a free hotel stay alone at a casino, positive media articles, to have the police look the other way. But, you know, it's not something that you have infinite amounts of. And then magic, which is such a great piece of art. You notice that some of these are references or at least sort of like takes on pieces of art that are in DCC. And this is one that's very close to one of the magic pieces of art from DCC itself. We have mercurial magic, the same way you have in DCC. Gnome mercurial magic, because they're slightly different. You have corruption, just like DCC. So if you're looking to play DCC, but in a punk, you know, as I said before, Running Man, Blood Bowl, Rollerball. Is that the old movie? Rollerball? If you're looking to play in that kind of a world and bringing in that gonzo, over-the-top, funny, ridiculous DCC vibe and tone, this book is your book. So many good pieces of art, so many good ideas, so many good spells. I mean, again, that's something that DCC does insanely well, and this book is no different. So many good spells with tables for each spell, and so you can, as they upcast, they get stronger. You can take tons of inspiration from that from your own games. But again, it's going to be of a very particular kind. Anyway, I'm not going to go through too much more of this. The Unseen Wall. I'm not going to go through too much more of this because I'm only 190 pages in, and it's 394 pages. Again, just so good. There's the world, the Olympic pantheon and gods of America. Religion in the North American Empire. You have kind of Greek gods. These are the Greek gods. But then you've got some extra ones, things that are added in that aren't particularly Greek. Trivia, the goddess of trivia. That's goddess trivia, I should say. That's great. Non-Olympic deities of America. You got George Washington there with the Declaration of Empire. The Speaker in Thunder. Jakeo, Jewel Eyes. So good. And again, just the art is really fantastic. Supernatural Patience. The Amazing Rando is one of the patrons you can have. Bring the Noise, Cosmic Journey from Death to Life. Circe, the Circe from, of course, the Odyssey. Medea, or Media? I think it's Medea, but I don't know. Barzodi. He is the American Deathmaker, the darkest dark, the human soul which has strayed the farthest from humanity. Dread Barzotti is the immortal undead spirit of necromancer Antonio Barzotti, who was assigned to destroy and demoralize British war wizards by Revolutionary General George Washington, who would later declare himself George Augustus I, first Emperor of North American Empire. Barzotti was ultimately betrayed by George Augustus and assassinated by the Emperor's allies, but the necromancer's rage and the might of his spirit only grew stronger. In modern times, Barzotti is a patron-level entity who secretly controls the American Necromancers Guild, which he himself founded in 1777. You can't dislike a book like this. It's so good. Prometheus Firebringer is one of the patrons. Yeah, you cannot dislike a book like this. I'm telling you, getting paid. So good. Okay, well, I highly recommend you guys check out Xcrawl Classics. It's just so vivid. It's so weird and gonzo and hilarious, and the writing is just delightful. You read through a paragraph and you're like, that's so funny. Again, am I going to use this? Probably not. I would certainly run this as a setting for one-shots or as an idea for one-shots, but I don't think I'm ever going to run a whole campaign here or play this as my system of choice. But man, Xcrawl Classics is good. It looks so good. So anyway, hopefully you guys find this one interesting. The second one is Grimwild, which is the cinematic fantasy adventure. Very different tone. In fact, the thing that drew me to it was how much some of the pieces of art look like Darkest Dungeon. And I am a sucker for Darkest Dungeon. You guys probably know that. If you've seen some of my videos, you'll know I've mentioned that before. So this is not, look at this. I mean, look, the night, it just looks so good. The art is really, really fantastic. Now, the system of Grimwild is just a system. It's not just an adventure or an art book. It's actually a system, which it seems kind of interesting. It seems pretty complicated, at least just at a first glance. I haven't read through it very, very much. So again, you're going to find better reviews of it and better overviews of it. But I wanted to draw your guys' attention to it, really for the art. But there's a good overview of how the game is played. So Grimworld is built with the Moxie Cinematic Toolkit, which is a tabletop RPG rule set that focuses on cinematic action and character-driven gameplay. So there's the key points of how you do it. You make characters, then when you play the game, you describe what your character is doing. You make an action roll. When the GM puts you into direct danger, you make a defense roll. You can make a montage roll to skip past parts that you don't like, and rolls are made with handfuls of d6s equal to a stat. You keep the highest to set the outcome, perfect, messy, or grim. If you roll 2 6s, you get a crit, you choose a bonus. Difficulty and damage, add 1 or more d8s called thorns, which might cut down the outcome. If the grim gets cut, it's a disaster, and things get... You can start to see it gets a little confusing just because there's new terminology for basic dice mechanics like d6s and d8s and rolling more and rolling fewer, and that can be a little weird. But essentially the idea is pretty straightforward. You're rolling d6s, the highest result on the d6 is what your outcome is, and if it's really bad, basically the DM gets to add difficulties there, and if you roll low on the thorn and you've rolled a grim, which is a low roll on the d6, then bad stuff is happening. Critical failure. So it's a new way of doing mechanics and things like that. And that's just what I can glean from reading this and a little bit ahead. But there's a more detailed description of how the game works. But the thing, again, that draws me to this game is it's creative, it's different, it's new. Here are the core rules. But the art. Again, there's a lot of pages without art. It's a lot of descriptions and things like that, and it's good. Again, from what I've seen, seems interesting, but I'm just going to get to a couple pieces of the art to show you guys, like this. Man, that knight looks so much like Darkest Dungeon, the Crusader. Clearly drawn inspiration from it, and it is so vivid. It's one of those pieces that I saw, and I was like, oh my goodness, I got to own this book. I'm a sucker for art. But this kind of art draws me right into the kind of game this is going to be, Grimwild. So interesting. So interesting. There's a lot of actually really interesting tables here, too, that you can use for your games in the toolkit sections. For example, vigilance examples. Below are some ways that a danger can manifest. So the danger and the hint that might be revealing that, what the reveal is, and the strike itself, moments. And so it's really interesting. Obviously, vigilance is a part of the game. But there's just a way of thinking about things. It's a little bit like Dungeon World in that regard. I don't mean that the mechanics are like Dungeon World, but Dungeon World was interesting when I read through it because it changed the way I thought about certain things. And this book kind of made me do that at a couple places. It made me think, that's an interesting way of doing that. I wouldn't have thought of that. And it sort of turned my consideration of some of the mechanics and stuff of regular RPGs around. Another great piece of art, right? Again, the combat kit, you have tiers of enemies plus their roles. And there's some influence there, I think, from 4th edition, where you have blasters and brutes and lurkers and marksmen, overseers, marauders, predators, protectors, skirmishers, swarmers, tacticians, and tricksters. And the idea there is that, again, the role that they're going to play is defines the sorts of things that they can do in combat. The tier of enemy is the sort of challenge they're going to be. So you could have a blaster mooks, or a marauder elite, or a trickster boss, right? You kind of create your own monsters there by using templates a little bit. And that's cool, because it really means that you're going to get into battles that are crafted. Not everyone likes that sort of thing, but there are a lot of people who do. And in keeping every battle kind of interesting in that regard, there's a nice toolkit for you to be able to build. But again, there's just a lot of good advice here too. A lot of good advice. And not just for running games generally, which is fine. Now, you have talked about that before, that I'm not a huge fan of wasting time in your RPG telling DMs how to run an RPG or good advice there. That's fine. But for how to run this game, how do you make use of the mechanics in this game properly? That's cool. Games should do that more, right? Here's what makes my game special, and here's how to run it to the hilt. Great. But again, such a good piece of art right there, and the guy in the front is basically the occultist, right, from Darkest Dungeon. So another one of those pieces that I saw, and I was like, oh man, I really want to check that out. But again, you get a lot of cool adventure paths. You get a lot of ideas here for character creation with a lot of backgrounds and wises, which is from things we've seen before. There are games that choose that terminology, right? The wise terminology. But again, a lot of cool tables for things. Another great piece of art there. Again, obvious, at least as far as I can tell, obvious influence from Darkest Dungeon there with the guy at the fireplace. He looks like the what's his name? The Bulwark, the champion, the fighter guy from Darkest Dungeon. You have different classes, essentially paths: bard, berserker, cleric, druid, fighter, monk, paladin, ranger, rogue, sorcerer, warlock, wizard. So it's very D&D 5e in terms of the classes available to the party. Obvious inspiration there as well. A great piece of art. Exploration, the different realities, which is a really cool idea to this world. The remnants, which are the forgotten people of the borderlands. The wilds, the untainted and unforgiving wilderness. And the ruins. The remnants, the wilds, and the ruins. That's so great. You can hang your own fiction off of them or topple them over and create something different. The point is to make a sandbox that's easy to play in. Seasons, that's really cool. And then how to name your seasons, right? Eager Dawn, Well Hope, Well Bloom, Green Wave. That's great. Summer months, Ash Breeze, Buzz Surge, Lazy Flare, Sear Storm. That's kind of funny. But you can use the created ones there or add your own in, make your own months of the year. That's something that I've always enjoyed doing. Another great piece of art right there. Really great piece of art right there. How to make region maps and all that. And again, this is actually just really good. The way to draw a region map here with the map symbols and the lists of things you can add, it's actually just really good procedure, really good practice. I like the way that it's done. How to do site maps and how to do dungeon maps, sort of. Settlement maps with, again, some tables. It's really cool. I really like this, and a great piece of art there. It's about 80 more pages. I'm not going to go through too much more. But you get a whole section on monsters and how to do that. And really quickly, let me go back to the table of contents to show you guys what this book has in it. Beyond what we just looked at, you have monsters, which is a good 20, 30 pages or so of monsters. Just about 20, 30 pages. And then you've got story kits, which are basically like pre-made adventure paths that you can do. And then there's a section on a bunch of extra stuff, right? Some extra paths you could do, the Artificer, the Scion. And really quickly, I wonder, it's not hyperlinked, unfortunately, but let me jump down to 144 because this is awesome. Page 144 of this book, which I noticed the first time I flipped through it, Thieves' Cant. An entire set of rules for how to actually write out Thieves' Cant. That's so cool. So it says this was created by Matthew Kessler and was stolen with permission. Thanks. But this is awesome. You guys should definitely use this. I mean, I'm tempted to give this to my players and then to write out, give the thief this page wealth and safety, danger and avoidance, routes and places, and then make it an actual part of the game where that thief then gets to actually understand and come to see what each of these messages they see throughout the book are. It would be great, especially if it's like an old ancient thieves' cant that's been lost, and so maybe you have to learn it as you go, right? The party can learn what these things mean, and as they go, then they'll have a sense of what the sort of the what the writing is in this ruin that they're discovering. That's super cool. So you have like, you come to this mega dungeon, and throughout the mega dungeon there are rooms that have been marked off with these symbols. Maybe there's a group of adventurers 100 years ago that came here and developed their own vocabulary to communicate, but they're all dead now. But you can recover, bits and pieces here and there of their dialect, of their thieves' cant, and then the players can start to know what's going to be where. Oh, okay, this danger symbol has shown up a few times. We now know that's a danger. Okay, this is a traps, right? This is well guarded. This is the territory of this kind of guy. This is a magic user in here, right? You could learn all of that. That's super cool. Anyway, I wanted to show you guys that because I think that's one of the it's a really cool idea from this book. So I highly recommend you guys check out Grimwild, a cinematic fantasy adventure. There's a lot to love about this book. And again, the art is really cool. Tons of good advice, really good, just sort of direct, practical ways of making maps and of setting up scenes and creating monsters. And it's well worth thinking about and using as a source of inspiration. So highly recommend you guys check out Grimwild. The third one is The Shadows of Estrin, which is a really brilliant world. It's sort of medieval, almost post-medieval horror, really, like gothic romantic horror. A medieval role-playing game with a horrific and gothic influence, with a quote from Bram Stoker. So you kind of get the sense that you kind of get the sense of what this game is going to be, right there. Now, this game was made by the same people who made the Fate Forge system, which, if you guys know, that's a review I did a while back, where basically it's a revamped version of 5th edition D&D, but with beautiful art and an entire built-in world that ties in with the mechanics of that version of 5e, and just it's a brilliant, brilliant set of books. You guys should get them. The first one is still pay what you want. I think the rest are now actually cost some money. And this book, Shadows of Estrin, book 1, is pay what you want, but the rest of the books in this series are actually cost money. I'm definitely going to buy the whole set because this is really, really cool. Once again, you get a really cool world with beautiful art, tons of great ideas for inspiration. Now, this game has an actual game built in, just like the other two things that I've just read through, and I don't know if I'm going to play this particular game. It seems cool. It's basically a D10 system where your skills and your abilities kind of combine together to give you bonuses. And the D10 is sort of the last thing that you do. So, you might, we'll get to it when we get to it. But what's interesting is that as you level up, the mechanics of the game, the DCs are low enough that you can just get to a point where most of the time you're going to succeed at low-level DCs without having to roll. And that's kind of interesting. So at a certain point, you stop having to test for the very low DCs just based on the way that your characters progress. That's kind of a cool way of doing it. You don't have to change the DC, but as the game goes on, your players are just going to get good at that basic stuff. That's kind of a cool idea. But the more important thing in this book is the art and the writing. It's really, really cool. Beautiful setting art, layout, character art, with an entire history of this world. I mean, again, hundreds of pages. This PDF is 293 pages in this form here. And there's just tons and tons of lore. More lore than you could ever need, right? But tons of stuff to steal from, right? We as DMs, we want to steal anything that's not nailed down and on fire, right? And that's what this book gives you. Tons of stuff to steal. Tons of stuff to use in your own games. Tons of ideas and inspiration. The writing is good. The world building is good. The artwork is so inspiring. Beautiful, beautiful book. Yeah. Shadows of Estrin. I think you guys should really check this one out. Again, I'm not going to go into detail. Now, the nice thing about this one, or maybe nice, strange, is that they talk about this at various points in the book. This is sort of a multimedia thing. There's like, obviously there's these sets of books. There might be stories, short stories. There's a video game. It's like a point-and-click adventure game that at least Act 1 of, I think, is out right now that ties into this. There are several pre-campaign, or there's several campaign books. One of them, the first one, is Pay What You Want or free. It's like Session 0 or Campaign 0, or the pre-campaign that sets up a longer story. Now, one of the things that is true about this game is it seems very, very narrative heavy. And so you're playing through a story. I don't know how linear the campaigns are. I don't know how like railroady they are. But it seems very clear that the focus of this game is narrative. You're telling a story. But it's great cartography. I really like that map. Really cool. And you get the different locations that you're talking about throughout this book here too. Ostabale. Ostabale, I think that's how you say it. It's a great city map. Very fantasy. That's one thing I think that I tend to fall into, is to try to make my worlds very realistic, which is cool, but I think I often lose the sort of fantastic elements. And this book has tons of fantastic fantasy elements woven in, so it's very real, feels lived in, the world, but it also feels fantastic. Fantasy, through and through. The disappearance of ritual stones. The temple's advent in Gwydri had many repercussions on the life of the inhabitants, and obviously on their spiritual life in particular. One of the most visible consequences of the new religion's rise to power was the almost systematic destruction of the stone circles, most of them inherited from the faraway Ergwin. The megaliths, after they were roped, were pulled down by oxen, or bornaks. Some were transformed into construction materials, but most often, certainly because of an atavistic superstitious fear, they were thrown into streams, the Pesdor River, or the ocean. Of course, Demerthane and people faithful to the ancient traditions violently opposed the destruction of their places of worship. Blood was spilled, lives were broken. But in the end, the temple relentlessly went on with its task of liberation until it had practically erased all trace of the ritual stones from the West's fertile plains. The Demerthane, along with some of their most zealous followers, fled into the Roim Mountains, where they were determinedly raised new circles of standing stones in hostile and remote places. It is told that sometimes, during particularly dark nights, pale figures seem to hover above the ground, tears of blood slowly weeping from their dead eyes, hands held in front of them like vengeful claws. They whisper the names of those who brought down the ritual stones in the past, and in the morning, the unfortunate ones who are called are found dead in their beds, their eyes wide with fear, streams of blood oozing from the corners. That's creepy, but it's a great bit of world building, man. Put that into your world. So there's tons of good ideas just like that. Highly recommend you guys check out this book. Shadows of Estrin, Book 1. I'm definitely getting the whole set. There's a whole bunch. They're not that expensive, but they're beautiful, and they all have tons and tons of great things. Some of them are, world building. Some of them are, this is obviously like the background, the universe of the world. Some of them are more mechanical. Some of them are about traveling. Some of them are about monsters. There's a couple campaign books and adventure books. So anyway, highly recommend you guys check out Shadows of Estrin. As you can see, it's a fantastic, beautiful book. So Shadows of Estrin, Grimwild, and Xcrawl Classics. 3 very different books with 3 very different tones, but I think they're all beautiful, thematically consistent, and well worth your time. All right, guys, that's it. Hope this has been interesting, and I'll see you all in another one.